I have a lot of concerns that I am been contemplating because I feel like the media is more and more ramping up with these disinformation campaigns. I don't know if this is Mockingbird Media, if this is install Kamala Harris, if this is cover up the war in Ukraine. But I want to go through some of these big stories that have me concerned. To do that, I have former CIA Larry Johnson. Larry, thank you for joining me today.
Always good to be with you, my friend.
All right. Help my audience and myself understand. From what I'm reading, it appears that NATO is now giving permission for Ukraine to just attack right into Russia, that instead of looking for peace agreements and an off-ramp, they're actually looking to ramp up the war, provoke the Russian bear, as they say, even more. What are your thoughts on these moves to attack Russia? And is NATO the one giving permission for these?
You start with your last question. Yes, it is NATO. It's the United States in particular. The West is doubling down on a losing hand. So if any of your viewers or listeners have ever been to a casino and watched somebody playing blackjack that's been losing. And so then they go out, they take out a massive loan to play one final hand that they're going to win it all, and they lose that. That's exactly what the United States and NATO are doing. They embarked on this war. This didn't start with the Russians going into Ukraine in 2022. This goes back to 2014. This has been a long-planned U.S. NATO strategy to try to weaken and destroy Russia for one simple reason. Russia has an abundance of natural resources that the West wants and needs. Everything from uranium, aluminum, gold, oil, natural gas, nitrogen. Go down the list. Russia is self-sufficient in those. The West wants it. And the West has a lot of economic interests that made some investments in Russia, quote investments that were designed to take money out of Russia back in the 1990s, that they're eager to try to recoup that. So now we jump ahead to here is over the last 2 months, Russia has accelerated its progress in moving west in the eastern part of Ukraine. They're taking back the Donetsk very rapidly. And so this latest incursion up to Kursk was planned in advance with the assistance of NATO planners, including U.S. military personnel. There were 11,000, 12,000 troops involved in this invasion into Russia. So at least 2,000 of them were foreign mercenaries, including U.S. citizens. The goal was to capture a nuclear power plant that's just west of the city of Kursk. And they were going to use it, the Ukrainians were going to use it as a bargaining chip, NATO as well, to try to coerce the Russians into giving up their control of the nuclear power plant Zaporizhia, which the Russians have controlled since February of 2022. And to put them in, people want to look at a map. If you look where Kursk is, which is like up at the north on the border of Ukraine and Russia, if you drop straight down, like from a 12 o'clock to a 6 o'clock position, about 300 miles south is where the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant is, which sits right near the river Dnieper. The problem for the Ukrainians is the Russians had a heads up that this was going to happen. Were not able to fully stop it because they basically had a border guard force there, but they reacted quickly in sending troops to combat the invasion by the Ukrainians. And the Ukrainians have been slaughtered. I mean, they're being slaughtered in mass. 30% of the invading force has been killed. Probably an additional 20% have been wounded. Another 10% have been captured. So it's turning into a real debacle. Yet, if you listen to the West, man, oh boy, the Ukrainians are just moving like a hot knife through butter. The Russians can't fend them off. The Russians are in trouble. Putin's on his, all of this nonsense. Instead of recognizing what it's done, it has enraged the Russians. because there are videos out there that some of the Ukrainian units have posted in a German helmet, World War II German helmet, speaking in German, calling the Russians pigs. And so that reawakens within the Russians the Great Patriotic War. Up to this point, they've been conducting this war with what's called as a special military operation. If they conducted it, say, as a counterterrorism operation, they'd kill everybody they capture. They've now announced that they're going to conduct it as a counterterrorism operation. And there is enormous domestic political pressure growing on Putin to basically take the gloves off and destroy Ukraine. So that's what's coming down the pike.
Okay. I mean, Colonel Douglas McGregor, Scott Ritter, others, they've been saying how calculated and measured Putin has been.
Yes.
And he's had the support of the people. But now with Russia being attacked, we may see a different side with that political pressure. What's interesting is, you said that the U.S. and NATO, they want the resources of Russia, but then they say in the news, oh, Russia wants all the resources of Ukraine. Even though they have all of them, it would be like us saying like, oh yeah, we want the resources of Calvary, Canada. Like America has the resources that we need, right? So 12,000 went in, and you're saying 20 to 30% dead already?
Yeah, 30% dead, about 2,600 dead.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Okay. Yeah. I mean,
and the number of tanks, armored vehicles, including Bradley vehicles, artillery pieces, HIMARS that have been destroyed. It's a devastating equipment loss on the part of Ukraine, and they don't have it. It's not like there's a big warehouse on the backside in Poland or Romania with all this stuff stacked up ready to be resupplied. They don't have it. The West is running out. We're finding out about the limitations of Western military power, and it's coming at a time when there's an increased demand being placed upon Western military resources to go to the Middle East, which is a whole nother can of worms.
Yeah, and I want to get into that. So let me make sure I understand what you're saying. My understanding is Russia basically has factories running 24 hours a day, creating weapons, almost like the United States during World War II, right? They have just ramped up. They are a wartime machine ready to go and defend themselves. And then you have all of NATO that can't keep up with supplying Ukraine. Isn't this just a mathematics game? Ukraine is already losing, and they're just getting further and further behind in the gambling game, as you alluded to. Have we seen that big final push where they've taken out a loan, or is that where this thing could trigger a World War III or a much larger war?
Well, here's the problem. The Russians are good at math. The Europeans in the United States, we're good at pronouns, okay? So, with that addition and subtraction gets to be a little difficult over here. We struggle with that math concept. But you're exactly right. In fact, right now the Russian economy, by Western estimates, not by Russian claims, Western estimates is operating over 3%, growing at over 3% annually. Surpasses anything that the United States, European countries are doing by a large margin. They have about 8% inflation on costs, but wages have risen 14%. So inflation's about 8%, wages have risen 14%. Again, do the math. That means the Russians they're making money even in the face of inflationary circumstances. So here is the West at one of our weakest points ever in history, pretending that we're Superman, that we can leap tall buildings in a single bound and faster than a speeding bullet, for all those who can remember the Superman shows from the 60s. But the Russians are in a position to really, if they wanted to destroy us, they could. But that's not their goal. They've been fighting to keep the West from encroaching on their territory and creating a threat. And we've been insisting that the Russians are the ones who want to go out and invade Europe. But a point I've made repeatedly on your show and others, since really the 1950s, the only country in the world that consistently, every decade, has been involved in carrying out military operations in other countries without the permission of those countries, without the invitation to send our soldiers there, has been the United States. No other country in the world has been involved with more military misadventures overseas. You can ask the Vietnamese, the Somalians, the Libyans, the Syrians, the Iraqis, the Afghanis, the Panamanians. We go down the list. And there's quite a body count out there with it, which is, again, one of the other aspects of this is the weakening of the U.S. diplomatic position. I've likened our foreign policy. Our foreign policy is being conducted to a manual. It's like having a guide to dating and romance written by a serial rapist. Okay? Not exactly the kind of book you want to take advice from, except that's exactly what we're doing. Because our approach is we're going to conduct a color revolution against you, or we're going to invade you, or we're going to impose sanctions on you. Where's the flowers? Where's the candy? Where's the romance? We want to be your friend because we want to help make you better. None of that anymore. It's bully, coerce, threaten. And not surprisingly, the rest of the world's looking around going, we've had enough. We're up to here with that. Enough with these Americans and their bullying. For the United States to go out and lecture Venezuela or Russia on election integrity, they look back and say, you want to talk to us about election integrity? Go look at what you did to Trump in Wisconsin, in Pennsylvania, in Georgia, in Arizona. Go look at the kinds of that you're locking up political opponents of the Democrats. Don't speak to us about election integrity. Go fix your own house.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, I want to talk to you about the Iran Middle East situation, but first, I want to get your thoughts on this. I'm reading that Kamala Harris, who right now has a potential of being the next president of the United States, I am reading that she is refusing the presidential briefing, that she is just now, over 2 years into this war, just now getting the basic briefing of the Russia-Ukraine war and the Israel-Palestine and the Iran situation, and that she doesn't even want to be briefed on the national security issues. How dangerous is this? Shouldn't she be up to date and ready to assume? I mean, she's one stroke or a second stroke away from being president if Biden dies or something like that. Are you hearing anything like this?
I have not heard that. It wouldn't surprise me. But again, I'm not as alarmed as you, because what you're describing is the current situation we have. It's not like Joe Biden is on top of his game and can remember, the difference between Russia and Palestine, and so what we're in a situation. I don't know if you've ever been on an airplane where the cockpit door has been opened and you could look up into the cockpit and there's no pilot in the pilot seat or co-pilot in the pilot seat. And you're going, oh, what? It's flying on autopilot maybe. That's the situation we are in this country. Nobody knows for sure who's actually flying the plane or driving the bus. And this comes at a time of extreme danger, because the chance to miscalculate can lead to nuclear war, and not just in Ukraine with Russia, because just put it in reverse. If the Russians were in Mexico and they backed a Mexican invasion into Texas, well, we've already got that. It's de facto, but where Biden's allowing it. But I mean, one with tanks and armored personnel vehicles and uniformed soldiers that came in and took control of towns, say Brownsville, along the Texas border. Do you think we in the United States just sit back and go, oh, those Mexicans, those crazy guys, no big deal? We would be outraged. We would be demanding a mobilization of our troops to go attack Mexico. That's what's unfolding in Russia right now. So we better wake up to that reality that we can't keep playing this game where we're giving the gang members in the neighborhood guns, and then they run around terrorizing the neighborhood with their firearms, shooting people up, that the neighbors aren't going to get together and try to lynch us, because we're the ones helping enable this, facilitating it. So yeah, it's very dangerous.
Yeah. You and I have talked about this before, but former Russian President Medvedev, he is calling for significantly more aggression than Vladimir Putin.
Yes.
He wants people dead. He wants Russia to be an aggressor, to go on the offense and not play it slow and calculated. How long can Vladimir Putin hold somebody like Medvedev off, or the Russian populace, before they say, you got to do something to protect Russia?
I think we've reached that point where his restraint that he's shown up to this point is done. He has said so the other day in a speech after this. The Ukrainians attacked the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, and again, the Russians control like 5 nuclear power plants in Ukraine now, and the Ukrainians keep claiming that Russia attacked this one in Zaporizhia, but they didn't attack the other 4? That's odd. So Putin made it very clear that basically the opening for negotiations, it's over. It's going to be now determined on the battlefield. And to that extent, but it is important to understand, Russia's not going to strike out in a blind rage with emotion, where when you get very emotional, you start screaming and flailing fists, and that's not how it's going to be. It's going to be very, very thought. They're going to think it through, and they're going to strike hard and heavy, and they may even be willing to take more casualties now, because what's happened over the course of the last week since this Kursk operation started, the number of Russian men enlisting in the military has soared. Previously, the Russians were already recruiting at a tune of 30,000 to 40,000 a month. So they were getting between 360 to 500,000 new soldiers a year. And they've been expanding their army up to, it's now, last I heard, it was about 1.4 million, which is double the size of what it was when the special military operation started in February of 2022. So, our U.S. policy towards Russia with respect to Ukraine has created a bigger Russian army, a stronger Russian army, a better equipped and armed Russian army, an experienced Russian army, and a Russia that is now in a military alliance with China, with Iran, and with North Korea. And North Korea and Iran play an interesting role, because the Iranians, for example, they downed in 2012 a top secret CIA drone. Well, they took that drone and it became sort of the model. They reverse engineered it. And so they are a major drone producer using U.S. technology, and they've provided a lot of those drones to Russia. So the military cooperation, it's not just Russia now. Russia is now in an alliance, which the United States doesn't have anything to match that. And we're losing influence in the Middle East. And yet these people continue to insist, oh boy, we're beating Russia, man. We're putting them in their place because we're going to continue to arm Ukraine. It's just madness.
Yeah. Is this why President Viktor Orban of Hungary is publicly saying this war will not end unless Donald Trump becomes president? Because if Kamala Harris gets in, it's going to be 8 more years possibly of fulfilling Joe Biden's 10-year commitment of giving U.S. taxpayer money and U.S. military equipment to Russia. I just think if we have any shot of this war and the killing and the dying ending, Donald Trump will try to go down that path. If it's Kamala Harris, I think she's just going to keep using Ukraine for this proxy war.
Now, Trump is naturally inclined to negotiate and recognizes, there's a saying in Spanish that it's better to have a bad agreement than a good court judgment, because even the good court judgment can work against you in so many ways. And Trump understands that it's not in the U.S. interest to be involved with these endless wars, except one of the drivers of the U.S. economy, I believe, and one of the biggest reasons behind our foreign policy efforts over the last 70 years has been to create enemies overseas. You remember during the 50s and 60s and 70s, our enemy were that international communist conspiracy, the Soviets. They were going to take over the world, the communists. We got to stop them. And then in 1991, the Soviet Union breaks up and dissolves. And so did we ratchet down and dismantle our military-industrial complex? Did we scale back our defense budget? Did we cut our presence overseas? Oh, hell no. Man, we doubled down. We increased. Oh, we got to find a new threat. And then 9/11 comes along, we get, quote, terrorism. And now we're back to, we got to stop the Russians and the Chinese. It's a grift. It's robbing the American public of their future. And it's putting money in the pockets of a very small number of Americans. If you're a defense contractor, if you're a former senior officer in the Army, Navy, Marine Corps, or Air Force, and you go on, sit on the board of Raytheon, Lloyd Austin, or Lockheed Martin, or General Dynamics, or Boeing, or, go down the list. There are a lot of them making a lot of money. And hey, we get to have a $2 billion airplane, the B-2 bomber. Think Russia's entire military budget, I believe last year was $150 billion. So think about this. If we could just convince the Russians to build 8 of our B-2 bombers, they wouldn't have it would eat up a big chunk of their budget. Or I guess if we had them do 80, that would completely surpass everything they have. I mean, that's insane. But that's what we're involved with. We are involved where we've created an entity that we got to always have this external enemy in order to continue to justify expanding the defense budget. And that defense budget needs to be cut. And the place to start is immediately closing at least 50% of the U.S. military bases overseas. We don't need to be overseas meddling in other countries. We need to be at home fixing our own problems first, before we go out and become the Cape Crusader for the world.
Yeah. If people want to continue to follow you, I want them to go to sonar21.com. That is the best place to follow Larry Johnson online for insight like this. Larry, help my audience understand that the Pentagon has announced they are moving a large number of military bodies, equipment, weapons to the Middle East. Everything I'm reading leads me to believe that they are ramping up for a war with Iran. It's got me nervous. Tell us what's going on with Iran from your perspective.
So right now, the United States has one carrier task force group in the area, is moving another one in. Lloyd Austin asked them to move quicker. You've got the WASP group, which is a Marine detachment, about 4,000 Marines. They're not there to go on the land to invade or fight Hezbollah. They are there to provide what's called a non-combatant emergency evacuation, non-combatant evacuation operation, NEO. Not Neo from Matrix, but Neo from this. And that's in the expectation that with the closure of international airports, that American citizens who might who are in Lebanon and or Israel trying to get out. The only way out would be via a ship. At least 3 combat wings of U.S. Both U.S. Air Force and Navy aircraft are in the region. So yeah, and with several destroyers. One of the ironies is in the Red Sea right now, you have the USS Cole. Now, if that name resonates with some of your viewers, I congratulate them because was it September 2000, the USS Cole was anchored in Yemen, and it was in Sana'a, I believe, and it was hit with a boat bomb from Al Qaeda, and blew a big hole in it, killed several sailors. That was sort of the start of the prelude to the 9/11 attacks, and now it's back in the region, and it's reportedly was damaged the other day by Houthis firing missiles. What people need to understand is that we're trying to portray Iran as the aggressor in this, and that is not the case. It is Israel that is the aggressor. It's Israel that launched the assassination of the Hamas Politburo chief and lead negotiator Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran. And Iran has vowed that it's going to retaliate. But the United States is very nervous that they're going to. That's why we put all these ships over there. The irony is if Iran retaliates with ballistic missiles, there's not a thing any of our aircraft or ships can do to stop a ballistic missile. We don't have an anti-ballistic missile air defense system on any of those ships or on any of the planes. So, this is like sending an air conditioner to Alaska in the winter. Hey, nice to, something to sit on maybe, but it's not going to have any effectiveness in the theater. There are a lot of interesting dynamics going on with this, because the word out of the intelligence community in the United States, and it's being reflected in Europe, it's being reflected in the media, is that Iran is hesitating. They're afraid. They're worried. They're about Israel's retaliation. So Iran is, their response is delayed. They're not going to do anything. I think that is as wrong as it could be. I would remind your viewers and listeners to the fact that in July of 1988, the USS Vincennes shot down an Iranian Airbus over the Persian Gulf. It was an accident, but the Iranians at the time didn't view it as an accident. 6 months later, December 1988, Pan Am 103 was blown up. Now, while 2 Libyan operatives were blamed for actually placing the bomb on board, I know that several CIA officers, friends of mine, including Bob Baer, strongly believe there's sufficient evidence to point that Iran paid for Libya to carry that operation out as retaliation. So Iran's willing to wait 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, and they'll do it more as an eye and an eye for an eye. Many have commented they anticipate that Iran's going to try to retaliate using the tactics like they did on April 13th, when they launched a combination of drones, a wave of drones, followed by a wave of cruise missiles, followed by ballistic missiles. But that was a demonstration project by Iran, demonstrating to Israel what it could do if it wanted to, that trying to create a deterrent effect to warn Israel, stop these attacks on us or else. Well, Israel didn't stop the attacks. Now comes the or else. And Iran's done 3 very specific things that show that it's getting ready, that it's going to carry this out and deliver its promise. The first thing it went to the United Nations and made a simple plea. Either enforce the international rules which you claim exist and punish Israel for what it did in its violation of this charter, or else we're going to act under Article 51 to defend ourselves. It's your choice. Well, the United Nations made a choice. They weren't going to enforce any punishment against Israel. So Iran said, okay. Next thing, Iran organized with the help of Pakistan, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, 57 countries, in a meeting in Saudi Arabia on Tuesday. And at that meeting, the 57 countries agreed with Iran that Iran has the right to self-defense.
That was this Tuesday?
Yep, this Tuesday.
Wow. Okay.
So they've done that. Number 3, Iran has established military relationships with China and Russia. So the best I can determine is this started in 2017. I say that because the first joint military exercise took place in 2019. I believe it was like February or March. And understand that when you carry out a joint military exercise like that, the planning for it usually starts 18 months before. So that takes you back into mid to late 2017. So they've got Russia and China in their corner. Right after the assassination of Hania, Sergei Shoigu, the former defense minister of Russia, traveled to Tehran for meetings with the new president, as well as with the supreme leader, the Ayatollah Khamenei. And accompanying Shoigu were several large IL-76 military transport aircraft. Gee, what could they be bringing? It's believed that they were transporting Russia's advanced electronic warfare capabilities, which can disable incoming missiles and drones, as well as S-400 air defense systems. Those systems can be deployed around sensitive Iranian nuclear sites, military bases, and oil refineries, oil production facilities. They are capable of shooting down an Israeli ballistic missile, even if it's a nuclear-tipped missile. Plus, Russia sent Russian forces to operate those systems, set them up, operate them, and then work with Iranian counterparts. This is sending a message both to Israel and Washington that if there is any attack on Iran, it could possibly involve getting Russia involved. Also recall, 2 days before the assassination of Hania in Beijing, the Chinese assembled all the 14, you had at least 14, 15 different Palestinian groups, not just Hamas, but you had the Popular Front for Liberation of Palestine, Islamic Jihad. I mean, they have a whole host of names, 14 different groups, ostensibly, wanting Palestinian freedom, but they're all fighting with each other. The Chinese got them together into a room, basically convinced them to stop punching each other in the nose and stomach, join arms. They sat down, signed a communique, and Hania, one of his representatives, was there to do that. So when the Israel kills Hania 2 days later, for the Chinese, this was a significant loss of face. And they view it as a direct affront, and it has solidified their support for Iran. So what I'm saying is, in this, Israel has now created a situation where Iran has the full backing of Russia and China in a way that it never did previously, and that the implications of this for expanding, because with all those U.S. naval ships like the ones that are in the Persian Gulf, Iran can shut down the Persian Gulf, close it, and once you eliminate all the oil coming out of those Gulf states, including Iran, you have created a massive economic crisis for the world, including China. And that's one of the reasons China's so heavily involved with this too. They want to avoid that, but they're also not going to let the United States bully Iran.
Okay. Wow. That's a lot to process. I remember Representative Matt Gaetz of Florida saying, Biden has pushed Russia into the arms of China like we've never seen before. Now we're pushing Iran into the arms of Russia and China. And I just have to imagine, when Hamas originally attacked Israel, my worry was that those Middle East nations would come together against Israel. And I'm still shocked that they haven't. But, nobody is taking in people from Palestine. I just have to imagine there may be a different reaction if the United States attacks Iran compared to Palestine. as far as, Middle East nations rising up, China rising up, Russia being involved, I think we would see a very different reaction. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, again, we have to look at what's the United States actually militarily capable of doing. So for these destroyers that are out there off the coast, if the U.S. aircraft carrier, for example, launches airstrikes into Iran, Iran will fire back at those U.S. ships. Now, each of those destroyers, they have these, let's call them air defense missiles that are fired out of, imagine you've got like 40 shotguns lined up, but each shotgun only has one shell.
Okay.
And so every time you fire it, and you'll fire 2 of those to go after every incoming missile, to reload that shotgun or to reload that missile defense package, that ship has to literally sail into a harbor somewhere to have new cartridges put in. Because it used to be during World War II, you had a ship tender sailing behind, and they could come up, and then you would be able to reload the ammunition. But the way that these new systems have been designed, they've made it impossible. So a missile swarm, any kind of swarm initially, could deplete the ability of these destroyers and cruisers to protect an aircraft carrier. So I guess the point I'm getting at is the United States has actually very limited capability to really harm Iran. And we need to think back look at all the advantages we had in both Afghanistan and Iraq in 2003. Neither Afghanistan or Iraq had an air force or an air defense system of any kind. And yeah, our planes were flying around, and we were dropping bombs, and we were firing missiles and blowing stuff up. But it didn't bring the war to an end at all. We had to put troops in on the ground. We have never had a war, at least since Vietnam, where through air power alone, we've been able to force a nation to say, "Oh, I give up, stop." Latest example, Yemen, the Houthis. In fact, the U.S., was it the Roosevelt that was there for 8 months, launching wave after wave after wave of air attacks on the Houthis to get them to stop firing missiles at ships in the Red Sea. And here the Houthis are today, firing missiles into the Red Sea, and we can't stop them. Yeah. So our air power against the Houthis was ineffective. But yet in our world of magical thinking, oh my God, we're going to unleash the fury on Iran, and boy, Iran's going to cower into a fetal position and give up. I mean, this is Washington, D.C., and the folks at the Pentagon have just gone insane, in my view.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. I want to go deeper on that, but I have some other questions I want to get to in our limited time. I'm sure you saw this, Larry. They're saying now that the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, this is from the Wall Street Journal, a drunken evening, a rented yacht, the real story of the Nord Stream pipeline sabotage. They're saying that a private businessman funded a shoestring operation, which was overseen by a top general, and President Zelensky approved the plan, and then tried to unsuccessfully call it off. The Nord Stream 2 blows up, becomes one of the biggest environmental disasters in world. This just reeks of misinformation to me. What are your thoughts?
When I start reading that headline, the theme music from Gilligan's Island starts playing in the back of my brain, for a 3-hour tour. So here you had the skipper and Gilligan, Marianne, the professor, and the Howells sailing off to, hey, we're going to go bomb a pipeline. Yeah, that happens all the time. This article is laughable, but it's important to recognize. You have to ask yourself, why is this coming out now? Why now? Because this coincides with the Germans announcing the arrest warrant for this Ukrainian who was in Poland and has skipped across the border, is back in the safety of Ukraine. If people believe that those two events are, this article and the arrest warrants, is a coincidence, I have got a bridge to sell you. Get in contact with me at Sonar21. I'll make a deal with you. So this is coming out. This is part of an information operation. All of this, I believe, is ultimately designed to prepare the way to get rid of Zelensky. Because notice the article, while it blames Zelensky, the former general, that Zelensky got rid of last year, replaced with a guy named Syrsky. And Syrsky's nickname is the Butcher, not because he's good at killing Russians, but he's good at getting Ukrainians killed. Zelensky is now being blamed for this ill-fated invasion into Kursk. And that it's turning into a debacle, as we talked about, with so many of the Ukrainian forces being killed and wounded, and so much of their equipment being destroyed. So this story is so implausible because it ignores the technical diving aspects required. They say, oh, yeah, these people are professional divers, without really explaining what the real experience is. But being a professional diver, being good at going down and looking at sea urchins, is a whole different thing from being able to dive down with explosives, properly place explosives, and do so in a way that, A, you don't blow yourself up, and B, you rig it in such a way that you can detonate it at will. So that the complexities of that operation were enormous. And then we go back, the original article pointing to the U.S. role was from Seymour Hersh. Yes. And Sy he's not a fiction writer. Sy doesn't sit around and say, gee, what BS story can I create today? And then he's not going to get these U.S. intelligence officials coming out of the woodwork to tell him, yeah, we did that. So this is an attempt to blame Ukraine as the West begins to recognize this war is lost. We're going to have to get rid of Zelensky. We've already got rid of Zaluzhny. We're going to probably have to get rid of Syrsky. And we're going to have to put somebody in there in Zelensky's place that might have a snowball's chance of hell in negotiating with the Russians. But the reality is now, I think it's too late. The Russians are in no mood to negotiate. They're going to win.
Go back to Seymour Hersh. The original intel that he gathered with his bombshell story was that I believe it was Biden, the CIA, and a couple people from the U.S. Navy put this bomb in place months in advance in case they needed to pull this trigger, and that it was in fact the United States and Biden behind this. But they keep trying to blame this yacht story. But I remember when this was a breaking news story, they were bringing on former, deep sea divers, and they were saying, listen, the complexity of these underground pipelines, you would have to have explosion and diving experts, and there's so few of them in the world. There's no way this could be a drunken yacht party blowing something up. So one, I just want to confirm that is true. And then two, am I hearing you right where you're saying that maybe they're using this to put a target on Zelensky's back?
Yes. We'll start with the last point. Absolutely. That's why I say whenever you're reading kinds of stories that come out, or the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Washington Post, or Financial Times, Guardian, these are always, if you will, leaks from someone in government, from the intelligence community, and it has a purpose. So the purpose here is beginning to, let's call it, prepare the battlefield. They're going to be able to have a reason. We had to get rid of Zelensky because he was reckless. He approved blowing up the Nord Stream pipeline, even though they're blaming it on Zaluzhny. He was the one that initially gave the green light after we told him not to. Don't you do that. And they're saying, what? We had Joe Biden standing at a press conference next to German Chancellor Olaf Scholz. And he said, hey, that pipeline is not going to exist. We're going to get rid of it. And the reporter, how are you going to do that? You'll see, he said. You'll see.
We have ways.
And immediately after the pipeline blows, you get the at the time, former foreign minister of Poland, Sikorsky, sending a congratulatory message to Biden. Hey, way to go, baby. Way to do it. And the same from Liz Truss, who was the acting prime minister at the time in the UK. I mean, just, they weren't subtle about it at all. They all knew that the United States was behind it. And it was supposed to be a covert operation. And yes, it was carried out by elements connected to the CIA's maritime branch. And specifically identified the base in Florida, which is the location of the CIA maritime branch. So, now we get this story. Why is it coming out now? Is it because the Germans decided to indict this guy? Well, again, why did the Germans decide now to just indict that guy? Now. And it's coming at a time where, on paper, Germany continues to profess its loyalty and support of Ukraine, except they're sending money to the country where the president and its leading general at the time made the decision to blow up one of the critical economic resources driving the German economy, which has now played a role in creating a recession in Germany because of the higher price they're having to pay for natural gas. So Germany's not cutting off aid and relations with Ukraine? Oh, no, heavens no. They're going to continue to send it. But boy, we want to grab that guy that did this. So all of this is, I think this is part of stage managed activity to lay the predicate to dump Zelensky. That's where we're headed.
Does Zelensky know that they have him? He would probably never, even his dying breath would never expose that Biden was behind the explosion of the Nord Stream 2, because it would show that Biden is a liar. It would show that Biden betrayed Germany. It would show that Biden is behind the biggest climate disaster that we know of. Zelensky has got to be terrified for his life, knowing what he knows. And yet all I can see is they are putting a target right on Zelensky to get rid of him.
So so Al Pacino, who played in The Godfather and Godfather 2, Godfather 1, about the same height as Zelensky. And Zelensky would be well advised to sort of watch Godfather 2, where Michael comes to the realization that his own brother betrayed him. Except the problem for Zelensky is he's not as smart as Al Pacino, either in person or in character, was in that movie. Zelensky is he's a bit of a political dummy, and he's gotten away with the grift. He has been shameless in what he's been able to get away with, and it's like, if you keep testing the envelope and you never get punished, you begin to think, hey, I'm invincible. Nobody can touch me. And that's exactly the stage that he's at. I think he's more in the position of President Diem of Vietnam was, a month or two before Diem was overthrown and then murdered. And he wasn't murdered by the CIA, but he was murdered by Vietnamese officers. And I could very well see a scenario in which Ukrainian military personnel, particularly connected with the neo-Nazi elements, would turn around and kill him. So he's a fool if he doesn't realize he's in that kind of danger. But, hey, he keeps getting these. He just had a visit from Lindsey Graham and the senator from Connecticut, Blumenthal, the Democrat. And, oh, my God, they were singing his praises. They might as well have gone in there with coconut oil and given him a full body rub. That's about what it was. Sorry to put that image in your mind.
I started imagining that, oh gosh, your analogy. I'm not supposed to laugh. This is serious stuff, but your analogies get me every time. They're so good. I thank you for helping us see through the propaganda. I still, after all my research, believe Cy Hirsch is at least onto the most amount of truth. But I'm just the propaganda that's leaking out. I mean, trying to cover up the Trump assassination, redirecting Trump search engine results to Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris being busted just this week for putting up fake articles, and then down below you see sponsored. They're just all paid for ads, paying right. Creators, TikTokers, Instagrammer. I mean, we are living through such a propaganda war machine right now. It's incredible. I appreciate you helping us see through it. If people want to follow you, the best place to do that, again, sonar21.com.
Absolutely. Sonar21.com. And welcome to have all of you've got a mountain of viewers, so welcome to have any of them come along and make comments.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you doing all the research you do. You could just, be enjoying, the sun in retirement, but you're up every day researching, helping us stay in the loop. So thank you so much for everything you do. And we really value and appreciate you, Larry. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Stephen. Much appreciated, man. Bye-bye.